and thank you for joining us for this event. A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. With that, I will hand it over to Minister of Labour, Harry Bains.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to acknowledge we are gathered on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people of Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Thank you to everyone for joining us here today. And thank you also to Izzy Adachi and Tess Estilo for being a part of today's announcement. Since we formed government in 2017, we have always stood up for workers of British Columbia. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen that many workers want to make their workplaces safer, have a say about their work schedules, and negotiate better benefits and wages. We're seeing this take place across North America. Just last week, after a long uphill battle, Amazon on Staten Island formed their first union. Less than a year ago, coffee shop workers just down the street from here formed the first union of Starbucks workers in Canada. We will hear from Izzy on her experience shortly. Workers in BC deserve to have a voice and choice to bargain without barriers. There is a clear evidence that current system fails to prevent employer interference and allows unfair labor practices to continue. We must do more to remove barriers to collective bargaining. The bottom line is the workers' right to association enshrined in Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms must be protected. The Labour Relations Code governs the certification process for those in a workplace seeking union representation. Since 2001, BC has been using a two-step process. It consists of initial membership sign-up followed by a reconfirmation vote several days later. This process gives employers the opportunity to interfere. Workers have been fired for supporting certification efforts. Employers have threatened layoffs. These barriers to rights to association of workers are unacceptable to me. Today, we are announcing that Bill 10 will amend the Labour Relations Code in two ways. First, it returns BC to a streamlined single-step union certification process. This is often referred to as card check. Second, it addresses an outstanding issue respecting the ability of workers in the construction sector to exercise the right to change union representation if they choose to on an annual basis. Under the new amendments, if 55% or more of employees in a workplace, in other words, a clear majority, sign union membership cards, they will unionize. No further vote is required. However, if between 45% and 55% of employees sign union membership cards, a second step consisting of secret ballot vote is still required for certification. This is not the first time BC has used single-step process. It was in place from 1947 until 1984, and again in 1990s. As I've said it before, one of my main priorities is to protect workers using fair labor laws. It is my job to ensure all workers are treated fairly and with dignity. Today's amendments are in line with our government's promise to grow an economy for all British Columbians. We are making sure workers have access to their charter rights to join a union and to have a say over their workplace safety, compensation, and benefits. And I'm proud to make these changes. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Izzy Adachi to say a few words. Izzy is with Worker Solidarity Network, and she's a former employee and a union organizer with Starbucks in Victoria. Izzy?
Thank you, Minister Bains. This change is an important step forward in advancing the rights of workers who are standing up for themselves and organizing. The two-step system gives management free rein to intimidate workers into rejecting the union. When we organized at Starbucks, 90% of workers committed to joining a union by signing the card. There was no doubt that workers at Starbucks wanted a union. Yet the two-step system gave management time to ship corporate union busters across the country in a pandemic in order to talk to us in person and have captive audience meetings to try and discourage us from unionizing. In spite of it all, we were able to organize the first union at a Starbucks in North America. It takes a lot of bravery and solidarity in order to sign a card and commit to standing with your coworkers and with your union. But many of the essential low-wage workers who desperately need the protection and democratization that is brought by unions still face too many barriers, which harms not only the workers themselves, but the communities that they serve. Single-step certification is an important win for workers who can now organize for their health, safety, and rights at work without delay. Now more than ever, people need to be standing together in solidarity and organizing for a life that has dignity and respect. Joining a union is part of our fight for our collective futures. This change is a win for workers, frontline workers, essential workers, minimum wage and service workers, and a win for the communities that they serve. Removing these barriers levels the playing field after decades of employer-dominant policies and is going to help us bring back protected, fair-paying union jobs into our community. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Easy. Thank you for sharing your experience. And now, to give another worker's viewpoint, I would like to ask Tess Estilo to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. I've been a care aide for 12 years. Like every care aide I know, I love my job. And I love the seniors that we care for. They are like family to me. That's part of the reason my coworkers and I unionized. We wanted more stability for our residents, job security, and the chance to improve things. And it did. Once we were unionized, we had a voice. Better than that, we had a collective agreement that outlines the terms of work. Both the workers and the employer had to follow our agreement. The structure and rules of a collective agreement made things better between us. When workers were not treated fairly, we had a process to follow to resolve the issue. And we had job security. I no longer felt that I would lose my job if I spoke up. Unions create balance and fairness in the workplace. That's why I am happy to be here today to see Minister Bains and this government remove barriers to unionizing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tess, for sharing your experience with us. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Minister. A reminder to everyone on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue if you'd like to ask a question and a follow-up. I'll pause for a second here to allow folks to queue. Okay, our first question today comes from Tom Fletcher, Black Press.
I'm looking for some clarification on the change to construction workers. That union members can change representation each year. This was also blocked by the Green Party in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Given that the BC building trades have no rate agreements with one another, is this aimed at unions like CLAC that don't have the same craft lines as the building trade unions?
Yeah, thank you. I think, Tom, my recollection is that this was an amendment brought in by BC Liberals, supported by Green Party, to remove that particular part and make changes. Now, we need to understand, construction industry, construction sector is different than a factory. Factories there year after year after year. And that's why in everything outside of construction, the rate is the third year of the collective agreement and every year after that, if the collective agreement is longer than 3 years. But construction, because the projects last 1, 2, or maximum maybe 3 years, that's why those workers never had the opportunity to change union if they wish to do that. I think that's why we're bringing this particular amendment to the labor code in order to accommodate those workers who are in construction, knowing fully well that those construction projects don't last that long, that they have the opportunity, each year if they choose to change union certification.
Tom, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm still not quite clear on what problem is being solved by having union raids, I guess, every year. How do you know that there's a need for people to move from one union to another, and isn't this really aimed at the building trades and their wishes?
Well, it was in our first bill, as you have mentioned, and the reason for that to be in there was, in the first place, the unique nature of construction sector. Those projects don't last 2 or 3 or longer than 2 or 3 years. So I think that's why, if those workers choose to change union, then they will not have the opportunity if we continue to have, just like any other sector, third year and then the year after, every year after that. So I think that's why we want to make sure there's a fairness for construction workers, that if they choose to change their union during that project, then they are able to do so if we allow them to change the union certification each year.
Next question comes from Andrew McLeod, the Tyee.
Yeah, hi, Minister Bains. I think Tom touched on it there, but I was hoping you could just say in your words, why these changes weren't made in 2019, was the last time you made changes to the Labor Relations Code.
Well, the two changes, the first one, the single-step certification, we were advised very clearly, publicly by the Green Party at that time, that if the card check or the single-step certification was part of the labor code change, they will not support us. Without their support, it wouldn't go through. So that's why it was taken out at that time. The each year raid period in construction, it was part of our bill at that time. As I mentioned earlier, it was amendment brought in by Liberals, supported by Green Party. It was defeated. That particular part was defeated, and the amendment passed, which allowed the change of union to continue to be third year of the first collective agreement and the year after. And that is the concern that is shown by the construction workers, that because the nature of their work, the projects don't last longer than 2 or 3 years. Most of them last for 2 or 3 years. That's why they wanted to have a right to change union if they choose to do that. That's why we are doing it now, that they can exercise that right every year.
Andrew, do you have a follow-up?
Sure, please. The other sort of underlying question, in 2018 you had a panel that looked at the labor relations code for you, and they recommended against the change back to the card check system, as you know, and of course with the caveat that it was sort of as long as the government could keep employers from interfering with the process. So I guess the question I'm asking is, at this point, why are you going against that recommendation?
Thank you. The panel was very clear. They determined that there is a clear case of employer intervention, interference, harassment during the certification process. And so they wanted to address that. And they recommended couple of measures which we adopted. But they went on to say that if these measures do not stop employer interference during certification process, this is what they said: if these enhanced measures are not effective, then there will be a compelling argument for card check system. So we have seen since 2019 there have been employer interference continues. And it is supported by the unfair labor practices that you see at the Labor Relations Board hearings. And so that's why we believe, in order to allow workers to exercise their constitutional right that is enshrined in the Canadian Charter of Rights, right to association, that right should be maintained without any interference by their employer. And Bill 10 and a single-step certification will do that, it will prevent employer interference, and workers will be able to exercise their constitutional right to unionize if they wish to.
Next question comes from Mclean K. the Orca.
Good afternoon, Minister. On the secret ballot and the card check, and to Andrew's point, they described the secret ballot at the time, the independent panel, as protecting the fundamental right of freedom and association and choice. What have you seen in the last couple of years that has justified going against the recommendation here?
Yeah, so when the panel went around and they heard the interference by employer during the certification processes, they gave a number of different examples how that is happening. They clearly said that there were threat of layoff, termination of employees who were engaged in certification process, threat of a plant shutdown, and then they came back with a recommendation that there are a couple of areas that we could strengthen to stop the employer intervention and interference, and those we adopted. And then they went on to say that if these measures are not sufficient to stop employer interference, then there is a compelling case to consider card check. Now, we have seen since 2019, there are clear cases that the employer continue to interfere. And I'll give you some examples. I gave a couple of them, but I give you more examples here. In February of 2022, the Labor Relations Board ruled that the electrical contractor on Vancouver Island improperly interfered with their workers' attempt to organize their workplace with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, with tactics such as threatening layoff. Then in January 2022, LRB ruled that the waste management company in Lower Mainland improperly fired workers with 22 years experience for attempting to organize their workplace with International Union of Operating Engineers. Just October 2020, the LRB ruled that the food processing company in the Okanagan improperly fired 2 workers for attempting to organize their workplace with the UFCW. So the evidences are there that the employer interference in workers' right to exercise their constitutional right to organize, right to association, continue to be hampered by employers. And that's why we're following what the panel said, that if that type of interference continues, then there is a case for card check, and that's why we're moving in this direction.
Mclean, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Minister. For those of us who, the majority of British Columbians who aren't in one of these workplaces or may not be members of a union, polls have indicated that it's kind of hard to understand how removing a secret ballot would forestall interference. Can you sort of describe or expand a little on that? Why making votes necessarily out in the open and public actually removes interference? It seems counterintuitive from the outside.
Well, I think I will go back to the panel, what the panel said at that time. They said, while secret ballot votes are integral to our democratic political system, we recognize that the certification vote occur in a very different circumstances than political votes. Certification votes occur in the context of a power imbalance between employer and workers in workplace. Employers control the operation of the business, have the right to fire employees, and can curtail or close business. Unlike political votes, Section 7 of the code limits unions' ability to communicate with the workers during working time. Employer, on the other hand, have an unrestricted ability to do so throughout the workday. Political candidates have voters list, while in the certification context, unions have limited information to determine the bargaining unit constituency. So I think it is clear that the right to association enshrined in the Canadian Charter of Rights belongs to workers. It is about workers. And Bill 10 and the single-step certification process is to uphold that right that all Canadians enjoy under our Canadian Charter of Rights. And I think no one else should be interfering when they wish to exercise their right. That's why we're bringing in these changes.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, everybody who dialed in today. Thank you to our speakers on the Zoom line. That concludes today's event.
Thank you so much.